Good afternoon to all my dear students. Hope you all are fit and fine, taking exercise, doing meditation, and paying good amount of time to your studies too. See, whether you believe it or not, you do have interest in it or not. It does not change the fact. And the fact is, receiving education is really a mandatory part of our life that we should never miss in this modern age. It builds our future and makes us strong enough to enjoy our life, not just only the informal education that we receive from home, but also the formal one that we teachers are trying to impart and you students are equally trying to gain even during this session of time when COVID-19 is spreading almost all over the world. We are really trying hard to give you our best through this technology, and we know many of you are appreciating our efforts and trying equally hard to learn the lessons. I advise you neither to avoid these classes nor to waste your precious time at all. So let's start from where we left. We have already read page 1 and 2 of lesson 1, The Lost Child. Now please look into your book and listen carefully. I am starting with page 3, paragraph 1. As they neared the village, the child could see many other footpaths full of throngs converging to the whirlpool of the fair, and felt at once repelled and fascinated by the confusion of the world he was entering. A sweetmeat seller hawked gulab jamun, rasagulla, burfi, jalebi at the corner of the entrance, and a crowd pressed round his counter at the foot of an architecture of many colored sweets, decorated with leaves of silver and gold. The child stared open-eyed and his mouth watered for the burfi. That was his favorite sweet. "I want that burfi," he slowly murmured. But he half knew as he begged that his plea would not be heeded because his parents would say he was greedy. So without waiting for an answer, he moved on. The writer wants to tell us that as they means the child and his parents, came closer to the village, the child saw many other paths, all full of large crowd of people, all approaching towards the fair. The child felt confused when he saw so many people. He somehow did not seem to enjoy this scene, but he was fascinated to see a new kind of world. At the corner of the entrance, he saw a sweetmeat shop selling gulab jamun, rasagulla, burfi, and jalebi. A big crowd of people gathered around the counter. The shopkeeper had decorated his sweets with leaves of silver and gold. The child saw this and he was tempted. He was attracted to eat burfi. That was his favorite sweet. He slowly murmured. He spoke in slow sound that he wanted burfi, but then he knew his parents would not buy it and tell him that he was being greedy. So he walked on. Next, the writer tells, a flower seller hawked a garland of gulmohar, a garland of gulmohar. The child seemed irresistibly drawn. He went towards the basket where the flowers lay heaped and half murmured, "I want that garland." But he well knew his parents would refuse to buy him those flowers because they would say that they were cheap. So, without waiting for an answer, he moved on. A man stood holding a pole with yellow, red, green, and purple balloons flying from it. The child was simply carried away by the rainbow glory of their silken colors, and he was filled with an overwhelming desire to possess them all. But he well knew his parents would never buy him the balloons because they would say he was too old to play with such toys. So he walked on farther. A snake charmer stood playing a flute to a snake which coiled itself in a basket, its head raised in a graceful bend like the neck of a swan, while the music stole into its invisible ears like the gentle rippling of an invisible waterfall. The child went towards the snake charmer, but knowing his parents had forbidden him to hear such coarse music as the snake charmer played, he proceeded farther. Here, the writer wants to tell us, as they moved on, the boy heard a flower seller trying to sell garlands of gulmohar. The child felt attracted by the flowers and went towards the basket where the seller had kept a heap of flowers. Now, the child again murmured that he wanted the garland. Once again he knew his wish would not be fulfilled because his parents would not buy him the flowers. Why they will not buy him the flowers? Because they would say that the flowers were cheap. Again, without waiting for an answer from his parents, the child walked on. Now, he saw a man standing with a pole on which hung all kinds of balloons in different colors flying in the air. The child was attracted towards the colorful balloons. It is the natural behavior of the child. Balloons are liked by almost all the children. So, the child in the story also was attracted by these colorful balloons and felt a strong desire to buy them all. Once again, he knew he could not get them. Why? Because he knew his parents well. Because his parents would not buy him, saying he was too old to play with such toys like balloons. He walked on farther. He walked a little more ahead. He saw a snake charmer who was playing his flute to a snake sitting coiled up in a basket. Its head was raised like a neck of a swan, as though it was enjoying the music which fell on its invisible ears. And how does it fall on the snake's invisible ears? It falls like an invisible waterfall. The child walked towards the snake charmer, but then he felt his parents would forbid him from hearing such coarse music, and so he walked on. Coarse means the unpleasant sound of that flute of the snake charmer. There was a roundabout in full swing. Men, women, and children, carried away in a whirling motion, shrieked and cried with dizzy laughter. The child watched them intently, and then he made a bold request. I want to go on the roundabout, please, father, mother. There was no reply. He turned to look at his parents. They were not there ahead of him. He turned to look on either side. They were not there. He looked behind. There was no sign of them. A full deep cry rose within his dry throat, and with a sudden jerk of his body, he ran from where he stood, crying in real fear, "Mother, father!" Tears rolled down from his eyes, hot and fierce. His flushed face was convulsed with fear. Panic stricken, he ran to one side first, then to the other, hither and thither, in all directions, knowing not where to go. "Mother, father!" he wailed. His yellow turban came untied, and his clothes became muddy. Having run to and fro in a rage of running for a while, he stood defeated, his cries suppressed into sobs. At little distances on the green grass, he could see through his filmy eyes men and women talking. He tried to look intently among the patches of bright yellow clothes, but there was no sign of his father and mother among these people, who seemed to laugh and talk just for the sake of laughing and talking. He ran quickly again, this time to a shrine, to which people seemed to be crowding. Every little inch of space here was congested with men, but he ran through people's legs, his little sob lingering. "Mother, father!" Near the entrance to the temple, however, the crowd became very thick. Men jostled each other, heavy men with flashing, murderous eyes and hefty shoulders. The poor child struggled to thrust a way between their feet, but knocked to and fro by their brutal movements, he might have been trampled underfoot had he not shrieked at the highest pitch of his voice, "Father! Mother!" A man in the surging crowd heard his cry and, stooping with great difficulty, lifted him up in his arms. Yes, now the writer wants to tell us the reactions of the child when he realized that he had lost his parents. What does the writer want to say here? There was a roundabout in full swing. As he walked farther, the child saw a roundabout, a merry-go-round. Going round in full swing, there were men, women, and children sitting on it and were going round in a whirling motion. They were all shrieking, they were all shouting loudly and crying aloud in a kind of dizzy laughter, confused laughter. The child stood and watched them keenly, sharply, and then he made a loud request that he wanted to go on the swing. But to his surprise, he got no reply. Means he didn't hear the sound of his parents. There was no reply, means his parents were not there. Where did they go? He turned to look at his parents, but he could not see them because they were not there. He looked in all directions but still could not see them. He got worried and started crying. When a child lost his parents in a fair, in the midst of large crowd, so it is but natural to start crying. The child started crying. Then suddenly he ran from the spot, from that place he was standing, crying in fear. As he ran shouting out for his parents, tears rolled down from his eyes. His face was hot and red due to fear. He began to panic and ran first in one direction and then in another. not knowing where to go. He yelled out loudly for his father and mother. His yellow turban came off, means became untied, and his clothes became dirty. He ran in all directions like a mad person till he felt defeated, till he felt tired. His loud cries now changed into soft sobs. Sobs, S-O-B-S. At a little distance, he could see men and women talking. He tried spotting, he tried finding, he tried to see his parents in the crowd, but he could not. All that he could see were people laughing and talking simply for the sake of talking. Why the people were laughing and talking? Because all came to the fair to enjoy themselves, to have fun in the fair. So the people were doing the same way. He now moved towards a shrine, towards a temple, where people seemed to be gathering. Since it was a very crowded place, he had to struggle through the legs of the people. Still sobbing away, he kept calling out for his father and mother. Near the entrance of the temple, it became very crowded. People were jostling and pushing each other to get in front of the deity. The child wanted to make way between their legs, but was knocked to and fro. To and fro, it's an idiom and it means back and forth, forward and away, to and fro by their harsh movements. Nobody was caring for a child who was trying to move between their legs. So he was on the verge of being trampled. Had he not shouted out for his father and mother at the top of his voice? Yes, he shouted out at the top of his voice. A man heard his cry. Why a man? Because the child was lost in the fair, so his parents couldn't listen his voice. Then a man in the crowd heard his cry and turned towards him. He bent down and lifted him up in his arms. This is done for the day. Take care of yourself. Bye.